Hola, ¿qué pasa, people? And this is the second Hola, ¿qué pasa in this series. I hope people don't think this is a Spanish tutorial. And in this tutorial, we are going to review what we have learned so far. And instead of using the word review, I will use the word recap, or in some videos I may use the word review, but just know that recap and review are pretty much the same thing when I'm referring to those. Okay, so what have we talked about so far? We have talked about what an operating system is, and we said that it is a very useful piece of software which enables you to communicate with the hardware conveniently. We also talked about the kernel, and we have learned, let me just write it down. We talked about the kernel, and we have learned that it manages processes, memory, device drivers, and system calls, as well as established that users are the people that use the computer, and each user should have a user account associated with him or her. Okay, so this was another topic. I'm going to just write it like this, user, and I'm going to just put it in a parentheses term. So we have just established what does being a user mean. Okay, just to sort of quickly graze over the topics we have talked about so far. Then after that, what we have talked about is we established that there is a difference between the user space and the kernel space, which is basically the user space and the system space, as well as there being a difference between regular users and super users. So to draw the difference, so if this is RAM, if this entire thing is RAM, this is a system space, which we will call system space, and this is user space. This entire thing is RAM. Then we also said that there's the super user. So there's the super user, and there is what I sort of termed as a regular REG. Oh, okay, I'm definitely going to quit spelling things on the video because number one, I'm just embarrassing myself. Number two, it's really difficult to spell and write and talk at the same time. So it's just, you would truly be surprised if you actually were recording the video how incredibly inconvenient it is to spell and write and talk at the same time. But anyway, we established that there is a difference between the user space and the kernel space, as well as there being a difference between the regular users and super users. That's what I just wrote down. Kernel space is only accessible to the operating system, while the user space is where the user programs reside. Super users get to execute certain commands that regular users can't, and then we also learned about system calls. I mean, we talked about system calls in the kernel, and we said that they exist for user processes to tell the operating system to do some things that only the operating system or the kernel can do. And this is actually how user processes, when they want something from the operating system, since they can't directly access the memory in parts other than their own, then they tell the operating system, hey, operating system, go do that for me. And the operating system can access that memory, and then the operating system does that, right? So this is how it's all connected. So a regular process, when it wants something that it can't access, it asks the operating system, and then the operating system can access that, and it interacts with that thing, and then it returns the result to the process that asked it to access that thing. Okay? And we also learned that a Linux distribution is an operating system made from a software collection that is based upon the Linux kernel being the core of the operating system. And in the last video, we have also talked about some Linux installation details. Okay, so I hope that this kind of makes sense. You kind of have a relatively good understanding of how processes exist in memory, of how processes interact with one another. Why do we need the operating system? Why do we need this separation between system space and user space, and why is it useful that processes don't mangle around with each other's memory, because they could overwrite something that's not theirs and cause bad things to happen. And so some of these things may not yet make sense, to be honest, and there has been a lot of information, and you may feel as though you have been overloaded with information. You may be feeling like there wasn't enough sort of time for you to assimilate the concepts, depending on how frequently you are watching these videos. But again, rest assured that these concepts are important. I will review the relevant concepts when time comes for them. So we will just kind of quickly go over them, and that will probably give you that aha moment, which you wouldn't have if you hadn't known about these concepts. So this is definitely a long-term investment for your Linux future, and I do want to congratulate you for making it this far, but this is only, I think, less than 2 or 3% of the entire series. I'm not really sure how I calculated it, but I'd say 2 or 3% through the series. So definitely stick along with me. Let's learn more about Linux, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Talk soon.